Well, it is caucus day in Iowa, the first major road test for presidential campaigns. Precincts across Iowa are now opening to registered voters. News 8 Now's Ken Kowzarowski joins us with the latest. Ken?
Emily, thanks very much. Good news, we are inside at one of these roughly 1,700 precincts across the state of Iowa. Bad news, the heat has actually broken something with the geothermal piping. So it's going to be a little chilly for voters who come here in the Lansing, Iowa area. But it's an interesting one. We knew Mother Nature was going to play a role in turnout. Pundits have been telling us that all week long. Also the fact that today's a holiday, some businesses have not been operating. So turnout could be lower than usual. We spoke to some organizers here in Lansing. They expect around 50 registered voters to be caucusing for the Republicans. We've seen a couple in just the last few minutes come into the visitor center and start to get registered and head downstairs for where the eventual secret ballot voting will be taking place. The people who do show up tonight, though, have the power to sway entire campaigns for the Republican candidates. Now, Iowa's former GOP chairman told some national outlets last week that the Iowa caucuses are basically a hobby for hardcore political activists. So for the candidates that are running for president, especially on the Republican side, the caucuses are all about trying to appeal to those diehard Republican voters. We spoke with UWL political scientist Anthony Chergosky. He says Iowa doesn't necessarily determine the nominee with tonight's caucuses, but it does narrow the field, and we've seen that already. Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey, dropping out of the race. Vivek Ramaswamy in recent hot water with the Trump campaign. Trump taking to Truth Social, bashing Ramaswamy, not calling him MAGA enough. Former President Trump, of course, still leads likely GOP caucus goers around the 48 to 50% mark. Nikki Haley currently at 20%, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis around 16%. And DeSantis has really made Iowa a do-or-die location for his campaign, pouring in plenty of resources. Haley has shifted her focus slightly more in favor of the New Hampshire caucuses, which will be coming up later this month, but not by any means has forgotten the state of Iowa. Now, Chergosky says that for both Haley and DeSantis, they're both right neck and neck for that second place spot. Tonight's final numbers are all going to be about that perception of exceeding or falling short of expectations.
If a candidate is seen as exceeding expectations, then that is a fantastic sign for their campaign. It can attract new financial contributors. It can attract new supporters for their campaign. If a candidate is seen as falling below expectations in Iowa, then that can be devastating for their campaign. We basically know that Donald Trump is going to win the Iowa caucuses, but does he exceed expectations or does he fall below them? We know that DeSantis and Haley are in a race for the second place spot. Will either of them exceed expectations or fall below expectations?
And to that end, Chergosky says if DeSantis finishes third tonight, it's essentially game over for his campaign. Meanwhile, if Trump overperforms, say around the 60% mark, that might signal the end of the campaigns for anyone not named Donald Trump. And of course, Trump has a ton of reasons to be confident, polling ahead nationally across the country by around the 60% margin. And just last week at a Fox News town hall, he said he's already decided on who his VP candidate is. So lots to think about there. You mentioned, you might notice, Emily, that I haven't mentioned the Democrat Party because they're effectively not caucusing. They are organizing across the state of Iowa, but not to really pick who's the favorite guy or gal in the race. Joe Biden, of course, the clear incumbent as the president. And as we've seen in recent election cycles, the caucus in Iowa doesn't necessarily determine who's going to win. And even for the Democrats specifically, 2020 had so many technical glitches. It was an almost nightmare for the party, where that's kind of why they've done away with the process. Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders in 2020 both believing that they had won the Iowa caucuses. Neither, of course, went on to be president. Now, Trump, of course, did very well in the Iowa caucuses in 2020, but in 2016, it was actually Ted Cruz edging him out by 3 percentage points. So not necessarily predictive, but a good barometer for these candidates to see how their campaign is faring very early in the 2024 election cycle. We'll have more on the results coming up tonight at 10, but for now, live in Lansing, Iowa, I'm Ken Kowzarowski for News 8 Now. Emily, back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Ken. Stay warm down there.